Ooh, so much to cover, so little time. We gotta talk about the whole tariff situation and its influence on fashion in general. But ultimately, this video is to talk about all of the recent developments, but we do need to cover a couple of other things that happened before that were an indicator that this might happen. All about the wild profit margins of these companies. And speaking of profits, let's talk about personal information and just how profitable it is to sell it for someone who just obtains it online. Data brokers are companies that are largely the reason as to why we're all suffering from so much spam in our emails, calls, texts. I generally get about 3 to 4 texts a day, a couple of calls, and I'm not even counting how many spam emails I get a day because that would be literally innumerable. Knowing from your purchasing habits to your address to your resume and other things like that, basically making it really easy to spoof you. All they need is just a bit of access to your valuable information. You do, however, have the right to privacy online, especially when it comes to your information being available for data mining. So all of these sites, they would remove this information if you just asked. However, it is very laborious to do so. This is where Incogni can help. Today's video partner is Incogni, a personal data removal service. They do it by contacting all of these data brokers and asking them to remove your information. You can use a code Fevral at incogni.com/Fevral to get 60% off an annual Incogni plan. So I've been wanting to chat about luxury for a while now, luxury products in particular, since last year in June, when there's been this report about Italian court revealing information about Dior's unethical supply chain. The article that I'm referencing right now is a Forbes article, which is something that should be taken with a grain of salt. We'll talk about a bit later why you should be taking anything that comes out of Forbes with a huge grain of salt. But a part of what I found really weird and suspicious about the reporting on this is mostly how it was discussed. The Italian court revealed a lot of information about how much the production costs, that this $2,800 Dior bag is actually only about $53 worth to the company to produce. And I'm not talking about just raw materials. I mean, this is what they paid for the final product before they put their price tag on it. And one of the biggest concerns was the fact that there was a lot of violations in terms of working conditions. And we have to cover them because they're pretty egregious. I just want you guys to know what they were. I especially want to underline one thing that I found really distasteful when it comes to everyone's reporting on this situation. These are factories in Italy. It is under the Italian law with workers that are not native to Italy. So when you see the report that a bunch of Chinese-owned factories are violating the law in Italy, I want you to understand that this isn't a situation that happened in their supply chain. That was manufacturing, and that was manufacturing in Italy. It wasn't somewhere far away where they weren't checking the conditions. Maybe Dior didn't check conditions even though it's in Italy. I think that a company that's as big as that has ambassadors like Anya Taylor-Joy or Jisoo or Jennifer Lawrence, can afford to send people anywhere in the world to check the factories, but that's besides the point. I just want you to understand that the way that it was reported, and I mean everywhere, it was underlined over and over and over, Chinese-owned factory. When you really get into it, what you find is that the workers there were Chinese and Pakistani. So the workers in that factory that are being abused are clearly knowing how the law is working and how people, even here locally in Canada, are treating immigrants and how there's like a lot of issues in terms of how they get paid, especially in things like farming. I just recently found out about that, by the way. I didn't fucking know that this was such an issue, but in the pandemic time, I actually looked into it because it was on the news. But regardless of all that, I think it's basically very inaccurate to report it like this, because for many people who are reading this article or who are just skimming it, they're all going to take away that this is a thing that happened somewhere in China. And based on my experience of reading a lot of the reports that were for manufacturers all over the globe, I realized that a lot of the laws that the Chinese government has, especially recently in the past, I would say 15 years, probably 10, their environmental laws are quite strict. They have a lot of laws when it comes to child labor. Books like Deluxe, How Luxury Lost Its Luster. All of these things are quite outdated. We're talking about 20 years ago, and to you it might seem like it's not that long, which I agree, but the progress and also the amount of change that has happened is really astounding. That's why I think a lot of people are thinking that they can still use this excuse of, oh, it's Chinese owned, to not be responsible for what was happening in their factories or in factories that they have contracted to work for them. So there's a 34-page filing that was reported. Italian police conducted inspections of Dior leather goods contractors Pelletteria Elisabetta Young SRL and David Albertario Milano SRL between March and April. The investigators found some workers were forced to sleep in the factory to have manpower available around the clock, 24 hours per day. Data mapping of electricity consumption showed seamless day-night production cycles, including during holidays. Manufacturing equipment safety devices had been forcibly removed to allow workers to operate faster. A number of workers were illegally immigrated into Italy and had no regular contracts. These unethical practices allowed one manufacturer to supply made in Italy Dior branded handbag for 53 euros or $57 that Dior then sold on for about $2,800, an obscene 48 times markup. For those of you who are not familiar, I know that a lot of people are always saying like, of course, businesses have to mark up things and whatever. And like, okay, sure. But a lot of people are kind of marking shit up real bad. At least in my experience, I have witnessed the markup being ridiculous. However, I would say that for anyone who's like more or less ethical and they want to scale up in the future, or they know they're going to have to scale up in the future, for example, if they have a name that's really popular behind the brand, would have to go for about 3 times the price of the out of manufacturing product. This is just to stay in a healthy zone, so you could afford to scale up if your business were to boom. In this case, 48 times markup is so insane and so egregious that I'm not surprised how big this story has become. While described as small manufacturers, Dior was billed a total of 1.6 million by both companies in the past year. That would amount to nearly 80 million at retail. The president of Milan's court system, Fabio Roya, said that business owners unfortunately don't normally question why certain goods or services cost so little. They simply seize the chance to maximize the profit. You'd think ultra low prices would ring alarm bells. And I'm gonna tell you for free that it definitely did ring alarm bells. It's just, I would assume that based on the fact that they ignored it, their alarm system is wired different, okay? They don't give a fuck. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of things that people are saying that are so egregious when it comes to this case in particular. And it's usually, but you guys, if we're gonna be stricter on things, the profits would go down. I wish someone would if there is 5 people who need a skirt and in first year of you being in business you sold 1 because out of all the people that you exposed to your product only 1 wanted to buy it, there's still 4 people technically who would be interested in your product. But after 5 years of you would be at max capacity. There's no reason for you to constantly have profits growing up. There's literally no reason. Every company like this, like Dior, that's has a really long history of being in business, they basically decide that profits and ridiculous profits that don't make sense are worth a lot more than anything else. Dude, I don't know. You already know what I think. I feel like I've been yapping about this for a long time now. I did want to talk about this today just because this was the first thing that I wanted to talk about just about a year ago when I was like, listen, not them saying that this is a supply chain issue, an unethical supply chain, and not a Dior issue. Sorry, Dior, but you've had a lot of issues. This isn't an issue of your supply chain, okay? This is a bag made in Italy, just outside of Milan. Don't tell me you didn't know that when you were paying $53 or $54 a bag a leather bag, mind you, that you didn't know that they were labor violations, where do you think they were gonna take that value from? If the materials cannot be cheaper, they were gonna abuse the workers. What did you think? And don't tell me that they didn't know. Don't tell me that a company that's been in business for so long, who consistently manipulate shit just to get bigger profits, don't know how the profit versus value of the company works. You want to tell me they don't know how this works? I beg your pardon. You can't be serious. Now, the next story that was kind of leading me to this video was all of the reports about global luxury spending that dropped in the past year. There was a lot of people who were talking about it as in, oh my god, you guys, like it's dropping, what the hell? And everyone was predicting that, you know what, after this 2 to 3% loss of the entire luxury market, in the next few years we're gonna bounce back better than ever. And I want to think that this is disillusionment of the masses. I hope that it is, because investing into a $20,000 coat that's not even made out of materials that you could potentially sell outside of the craze of markets is a really bad investment. But I'm kind of on the fence when it comes to that. I think that this is just an effect of the current market and how bad it is. But I do think that more people should be making a lot wiser choices. I had to do some research for work, and I opened TikTok and logged out so I could have more of a impartial view at a For You page. Basically just like, what is it gonna show me if I'm not on my algorithm? I did get a bunch of luxury item unboxings and other things like that just like sprinkled throughout. I spent a long time going through that whole thing because I needed to write a report on trends, and I'm gonna tell you what, I have never seen luxury look so fucking cheap. And I think it's because honestly all of this like quiet luxury approach and whatever, it just screams conservative bullshit, which is like the quickest way into the lameville you could ever find. Let's get to the whole tariffs thing, right? America said that they were gonna tax Chinese goods around 254% at this point, which is ridiculous. And to those of you who are like, what, are they crazy? They're not crazy. The administration right now, they just want to get everything in America super cheap in terms of ownership of things, production, stocks, anything. So a bunch of oligarchs at the top could buy it and basically own the entire country. Like just 5 people could own the entire country. That's what's happening. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing. They're just fucking you over. When they were announced, I was like, well, you have got to be stupid. And they're not. I told you what they're doing it for. But outside of it, you have got to be a goddamn idiot to go into a tariff dispute with a country like China, a country that produces most of our shit, if not all of our shit at this point. Chinese manufacturers did a really funny thing. They released a bunch of videos where they tell you exactly where, for example, Dior sources their things, like their silk. They said where Louis Vuitton sources their things or even produces their things. They talked about the furniture. They talked about Zara. I mean, it's not a surprise that all of their shit is produced somewhere else. They also had a lot of issues with it. They had a lot of big scandals. They basically gave all this information away, like the actual websites where you can find manufacturers, places where you can source materials, instead of going through a bunch of middlemen. First and foremost, I want to say that was funny as shit. This is petty, yes, I know, but is it hilarious? Yes. And also, I'm not against petty. I mean, like, what's the problem? You want to have an issue? Let's have an issue, right? I kind of get it. Dude, I gotta mention that too. But I started seeing on TikTok people who have compiled those links into a file, into like a PDF file or some shit, and they started charging people for it. All of you goofy, that's not even like, that doesn't make any sense. All of you goofies. Could I call everyone goofies? Is that allowed? Is that a thing? Anyway, all of you who are purchasing that, that's so stupid. I need you to get it together. The information is free from the Chinese manufacturers themselves. Like, they already posted it, bitch. You can just look it up. You don't need to be paying somebody to compile a list of them. You can do it yourself, girl. It's not gonna take you that long. The fact that there's just people who do this shit, it's like, do you guys not notice that we're living like a bunch of rats fighting over one piece of bread? Like, not even a good piece of bread. It's all moldy and shit. Like, don't you see? This is exactly the parasite situation. Like, we're fighting for crumbs between each other when we should be fighting them. In any case, then I see that there's a few companies that have said like, no, we don't produce there, we don't manufacture there, yada yada. Just from knowing how long those supply chains are. You might not be manufacturing there, but you're probably getting your materials from there. The amount of minerals that are really important for production that China produces is so high. It's about like, it's in the 90th percentile, okay? Really important for production, different types of production they have and outsource. And even though about 15% or 20% of whatever they produce goes to the United States, I don't think they would give a fuck. I'm going to be real with you, because they're in a position right now where they don't have to be worried that their people are not going to get medication, or that the supply to medical equipment, like things like needles, is going to be cut off. They're producing in that shit. And this is what's important, by the way. When people are talking about like embargoes, tariffs, sanctions, what actually affects people is not champagne that's not being brought in from France, or amaretto cherries from Italy, which, I mean, it would affect me personally, but in general, that's not what countries give a fuck about, okay? All the things that they give a fuck about, they produce. This is a silly situation that's not going to be silly for a long time. I did see that Forbes released an article talking about this whole situation. They talked about those TikTok wholesale finds from China, from Birkins to Birkenstocks, are probably fake. Here's why. First and foremost, I'm gonna tell you what, to all of you who are thinking right now that I'm saying that all of those products that they have mentioned in those videos are actually the real deal, I don't really. I think it's a mix. Okay, I think that a lot of companies who said that they don't produce their, or they don't have any connections in terms of supply chain where they get their shit from China, I do think that many of them are lying. Let's be real. I mean, just look at the amount of shit that's produced there. But would I say that even Birkins are made in China? Dude, I don't know, because honestly at this point I don't trust any of those fuckers. And even though I do know that Birkins are produced in France, I know how they're produced. There's like an innumerous amount of goddamn videos explaining the stitching and whatever. Even last week, I think a video got quite viral on Twitter. This guy posted it talking about the manufacturing process, and like, he is right, this is the way that it's manufactured. At least some of those bags. I'm not gonna claim all of them. In this particular case with Birkins, I do want to tell you guys that even though I do think it's produced in France, even though I do think they have their artisans, even though I do think that they teach them, I also do think that they don't pay them enough. Not because they pay them under minimum wage or that it's like illegal amounts or something like that. No. I am just saying that in Paris, and I guess in France in general, but more so in Paris, you do need to make quite a bit of money to live comfortably, to just, there's a difference between minimum wage, okay, and livable wage. And there's usually a big gap in between the two, which is not an acceptable amount to pay people. So, for example, in Vancouver, Canada, the minimum wage is $17.4 an hour, and this is Canadian dollars, whereas our livable wage, as per the 2024 living wage in Metro Vancouver report, you have to be making $27 an hour. So there's a $10 difference, okay? In France, to live a good, not lavish, but good life, you have to be making about 5,600 euros a month. Okay, by all accounts that I could find of people whose parents, for example, worked for Hermes, who were artisans their entire lives, like not entire lives, but like 30, 40 years, the money that they were making were in the 3,000 to 4,000 euros a month. I don't think that a company that has such huge profits, I don't think they can justify that, to be honest, especially considering, I don't know if you know this, most of you probably know this if you're interested in this type of shit, Hermes has a really weird way of selling shit. Like, they have loyalty programs. You have to be a client that buys a certain amount of things before you could even put an order for a Birkin, which is usually what people want from them. I know that there's a certain amount you have to spend a year so you don't have like a bad relationship with them. To me, this is idiotic, because I do not want this weird ass relationship where I have to keep in touch with a business so I could buy a thing from them. That's just ridiculous. Like, I don't want you in my life. I want a thing from you, I buy it, and I get the fuck out. I don't want to have this whole thing. When it comes to their system, I would assume that if you have a minimum amount that people have to be paying a year, it's kind of like a subscription service. If you have that, you just don't have an excuse as to why you're not paying well above and beyond just the livable wage to the people who are making the product. Okay, there's no way this can be explained. There are also artisans that go through training, rigorous training. They go through apprenticeships and other things like that. Their labor is valuable. They're not, you can't just find somebody who can whip up a Birkin out of thin air, so they should be compensated well. And by all accounts that I could find anywhere, and they're really tight-lipped about it, and this is always going to be very suspicious to me because this is the capitalist way. Don't talk about how much you make just so we can fuck all of you over. I genuinely don't understand how a company that's been reporting profits while everyone else was shrinking in terms of their market, the entirety of the luxury sector shrunk last year, but Hermes grew. I believe it was like 11% or some shit like that. This is not a little number, okay? So considering the stability of their income because of their programs of like even being able to buy from them, considering how much they're getting per one bag, I know that it takes money to produce, but the numbers still don't make sense in terms of how much you pay your artisans. A bunch of weirdos in your offices probably make a crazy amount of money a year for a made-up job. A bunch of seats just filled with people who don't know what they're doing because they're doing nonsense and they're just coming up with new terms of like, ooh, an energized, synergized approach to scrumming and gramming. Bitch, you came up with that. They really love coming up with new nonsense. And sometimes I'm like, this is not a bad idea, but this is just common sense. Like, have you guys not been doing this before? Like, what the fuck? Forbes released this article afterwards being like, they're probably lying. All of them are lying to you actually. None of them are their suppliers. And it led me to another rabbit hole, and I hate this. You guys, I wish things weren't like this. This is why I started a second channel where I just do gaming, because I do not love the way that the world is set up currently. This is not it. When you read the article, they don't really have proof except for the word of some of the companies. Some of the companies are just quiet about it right now. They don't even want to address it. A lot of those companies that said that they did not produce there, they don't have proof to actually debunk this. And knowing just the amount of things that are produced in China, there's no way they don't get at least something, at least a buckle produced there. And this led me to look up Forbes as an institution. As a, well, an institution is a really rich word to use here. What do I call this? It's just a magazine. It led me to the chairman, editor-in-chief, Steve Forbes. He is a descendant of the Forbes, like the original Forbes who made this, I believe. It didn't take long. It's literally in his first Wikipedia page paragraph. The fact that he was a candidate in 1996 and 2000 for Republican presidential primaries. He was also appointed chairman of the Board of International Broadcasting in 1985. And if you're confused as to what the fuck that is, which I was, I opened it, and of course, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and fucking Nixon administration. Whatever, you guys. He's like a big player in all of these, like Freedom Works, for example, like an advocacy group, basically a lot of right wing bullshit. And I'm trying not to be too explicit about this sometimes because, dude, I know that people really appreciate when I call things as they are, but I have to censor myself a little bit in terms of the words that I'm using sometimes, because my channel gets a hit every time I mention anything. Just look at my video about Snow White and where it got stuck. Yeah. And then look at all of my videos after the losers video. Yeah. This is a pattern at this point. It is what it is, girl. I can't just like not say it how it is. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where this is not an option. And every single time I want to make a silly little video talking about suppliers of luxury brands, this is where we fucking end up. Whatever. Hope you guys are having a great time. I'm trying to keep myself sane by doing some more like humor focused stuff on this second channel. Oh, find the I gave, you gave? That's crazy.
I know. Wait, I don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that is, but I'm okay.
If I gave, you gave. Walking down the street, I would have never. I don't know that, man. The gaming channel, I just opened it. If you haven't heard about it on my community post, I have just collaborated with Jewellery, who has like a gaming channel, and she has a Sims 3 series of videos that are super funny that you should check out, and check out our video together, because honestly, we low-key have like a really fun dynamic going on. If you like a bit of humor, if you want to feel like you're at a slumber party with the girls playing games, come over, because losing sanity because of the past 5 years, not gonna lie, yeah. Let me know how you're doing. If you're people who are, you know, if you're my people, I want to know how you are. I'll see you soon. Bye.